Today we're checking out the Heygears G1X. It's a brand new UV printer that prints in 2D, 3D, and everything in between. This is a new category for consumer printing that we're referring to as textured printing. So what is textured UV printing? It's kind of like if your traditional 3D printer had a love child with a 2D photo printer. Instead of a hot end for plastic, the G1X has an Epson i32 printhead and 8 channels for liquid ink. Unlike traditional 3D printing, where the color and finish of your model is dependent upon the material that you feed it, the G1X UV printer blends 6 basic inks to produce over 10,000 photorealistic colors. This is 2 more inks beyond the standard CMYK. The Epson i3200 adds light cyan and light magenta for higher quality images with better light tones. The G1X toolhead lays down thin layers of ink with one pass, then cures it with a UV light on the next. If you're printing something flat, like a photo, a poster, or your own custom stickers, it only needs 1 to 3 passes. A layer of white for a clean background, which you can totally skip if you're printing on a white surface, a layer of color, and an optional layer of gloss to make it super shiny. The texture is built up with layers of super fine, opaque white ink, and only the topmost surface of the model gets a splash of color. Full 3D printing follows a similar route, but adds water-dissolvable support material to the process. Heygears is known for their prosumer and medical-grade resin printers, and I reviewed one of those for a while back on Tom's Hardware. It's a really great machine, so if this is the first time you're hearing about Heygears, just know that they've been around since 2015, they've got tons of experience in the 3D printing space, and they've applied their knowledge of resin 3D printing to bring you this totally new UV experience. Now, to be clear, Heygears asked me to beta test the G1X, and in exchange, they offered to sponsor this video, so I can tell you all about it. The unit I have in my workshop is not the final retail product, but it's very close. And when I'm done with my tests, we're going to pop it back in the crate and return it to Heygears. So this one's just a loaner. Just so you know, while this technology is incredibly new for desktop machines, this kind of printing has been around commercially for years using large, expensive industrial printers. Heygears is the first company to bring this industrial tech right to our desktops with a consumer-grade, truly full-color 3D printer. I've been keeping an eye on this tech for a while now, and seeing it enter the consumer market is game-changing for makers like you and me. Heygears has done a bang-up job of making UV printing easy and super accessible. So, who should get this machine? Now, I don't want to tell you how to spend your money, but I do want you to understand that UV printers produce art, not practical prints. This machine is perfect for small businesses and entrepreneurs, and for people who want to print up marketing materials or make cool art to sell at festivals or on Etsy. It's great for customizing things, especially things that you might make with a traditional 3D printer. You could also use this to fully 3D print custom game pieces that don't require painting, or game boards, or custom miniatures. And I gotta say, it's one heck of a photo printer. So let's start there. This is an old photo of me and my horse back when I was in high school. It was taken with a film camera, and much later I digitized this on a flatbed scanner. It's been rattling around my hard drive for years now. I used the G1X to print it on acrylic and add some memory that I can proudly display. To make this, I mirror imaged the photo. Now that's especially important because there's text on my shirt. And then I popped it into Blueprint Studio. I put a piece of acrylic on the sticky mat and let the G1X take some measurements. Now the printer can see this acrylic with its laser, but it's hard for me to see it with my own eyeballs. So I put some tape down on the edges to see where to place the photo. Since I want to print this on the back side of the acrylic, I'm going to change the setting to CMYK first, and then the white. The color inks are really translucent, so you need that layer of white to make it look like a proper photo. It just took a couple of minutes to print, and it looks really great. Printing on the back of the acrylic makes it look like a framed photo without the frame. Now you could flip it over and print a frame right on the acrylic, and maybe we'll do that next time. You can also use this method to print photos and images on anything flat that fits in the bed. Now, let's show off some textured prints. I've been making some fun prizes that I can hand out at Open Sauce while I'm exhibiting there. I'll be showing off my 3D printed battle tops and letting people compete for little prizes. Here's a couple of ceramic magnets that I made with UV texture. I made these images in Canva and then brought them into Blueprint Studio. This one's made with 2 layers, a flat background and then a textured image, so I could have absolute control over the amount of texture on the product. Heygears has an AI-powered texture generator built right into Blueprint Studio. This does a really great job of finding the subject in your image and pulling that out. It's not just looking for patterns of dark and light. You can really see what I mean in this art print. The texture generator recognized the person in this image and gave her separation from the background. It also lifted the column in the back and the skull and book on the table. Blueprint Studio will also let you bring in your own texture maps that you can make with something like Photoshop. I've 3D printed a lot of lithophanes in my time, but I never got around to mastering color lithophanes. The G1X does something very similar, but with much higher quality than I'd ever get from a filament printer. This light box uses an image of Van Gogh's Starry Night, which is public domain. I used Canva to remove the tree and then manipulate the image so that it was wide enough to fit in this lit frame. The frame came with a piece of acrylic, but I wanted to see if I could 3D print the canvas. So this is actually a 3-layer thick rectangle of PC that I printed on one of my Core XY printers. We need to use high temp filament for this because the UV light in the G1X is hot enough to warp PLA if you put it in there for more than a couple of passes. Bonus tip, if you want to 3D print things that you're going to put in a UV printer, the smoother the top layer, the better your UV printer is going to turn out. This print used a smooth plate, but this one had a textured cold plate. The layers of ink are so fine they can't cover up your surface texture or hide layer lines. This is just something to keep in mind when you're designing your projects. I've also got a couple of samples of 3D printing that I wanted to share. Both of these models were prepped by Heygears because right now this kind of printing is so new, there aren't a lot of tools for coloring 3D sculptures besides something like Blender. One easy option is using an AI modeling tool. Now, I know we all have mixed feelings on AI tools creeping into our creativity, so I'm going to explore some options and circle back later with you guys when I know more about this. This tiny sandwich is a keycap. It's incredibly detailed, with toasty bread, green lettuce, red ripe tomatoes, and this tiny bit of melted cheese. I didn't do anything to this model. I just dragged it into Blueprint Studio's 3D slicer, which looks exactly like your standard resin slicer. Okay, there's one difference. When you add supports, it covers it in a wraparound support, which translates into a protective shell of water-washable support material. When the print is done, we drop it into clean water, swirl it around, and after a few hours, it's all melted away. This is so much easier and cleaner than processing traditional resin prints, because it's already cured in the machine during the 3D printing process. I've also got this little miniature diorama, and just look at these tiny details. This is so amazing. Now, I'm sure you're wondering what all of this is going to cost you, so let's talk about that ink. Heygears uses bottled ink. For 2D and texture printing, you're going to use ink in these 300 milliliter bottles, and you'll pour it into a cartridge on the back of the machine as you need it. You will get every drop of ink. There's a born on date stamped on the bottle and a best by date a year later. But there's no RFID tag to prevent you from using this ink as you see fit. If you know, you know. Now, I asked about ink prices, and these will retail at $39 to $59 for the single bottles, with white being cheaper and gloss more expensive. You'll get a discount for buying these in bundles and up to 42% off if you want to stock up during the early bird sale. Now, keep in mind, the 3D ink has a totally different formula specifically engineered for making those taller, multi-layer prints. This ink comes in a big liter-size bottle. Pricing came in during editing. The UV resin will be priced the same as the ink, with a liter of white or support coming in at $39 retail, $25 on that early bird sale. Color resins are $49 retail, on sale for $29, and the gloss is $59 retail, on sale for $35. Now that's really cool. Now let's talk about hardware options because they all use the exact same base unit. This means you can start at an entry-level tier and upgrade to the higher-end printhead or the 3D printing module later on down the road. First up is the base Heygears G1. This version uses a cost-effective F1080 printhead with 6 ink channels to handle your CMYK, white, and gloss. It prints at 720 to 900 dpi, and it can do up to 5 millimeters in height for textured printing. It can't do full-on 3D printing right out of the box, but it's an amazing starting point for trying out UV textures. And here's the best part. It's fully upgradable. All you have to do is swap out the tool head. Now, if you step up to the G1X, you get that industrial Epson i32 printhead that I mentioned earlier. It features 8 ink channels plus a 9th for the cleaning fluid. This head is faster, and those extra channels add light cyan and light magenta for a much wider color range. The Epson tool head is also heated, and this model comes equipped with an automatic agitator inside the white ink tank to keep those heavy pigments from settling. Finally, you can upgrade the G1X to the 3D printing configuration. This one swaps out the light cyan and the light magenta channel for an extra white to speed up your print times, and also you need a channel for your support material. You'll get a continuous refill station so you can buy your ink in bulk and keep it flowing automatically during large prints. And while we're on the topic, that automatic cleaning fluid is used to keep the tool head clear. All the waste is collected in a normal, reusable tank that you can just dump into an old jug and dispose of like paint. Unlike some other machines on the market, this tank isn't a costly consumable that you have to keep buying again and again. But speaking of consumables, let's talk about the tool heads themselves. If you've never researched 3D printing before, you need to know that these tool heads do wear out over time. A UV printer is a little more like taking care of a Tamagotchi pet than a filament printer that you can chuck in a corner and ignore for months on end. Heygears got ahead of the problem by giving the tool head a sealed parking pad to lock in moisture when it's idle. And now as long as you keep it plugged in, it'll be able to keep running its own maintenance cycles using just a few millimeters a day of cleaning fluid. Unlike other machines, you don't need to run it daily, but you should check it every week to make sure that there's plenty of cleaning fluid in the system. Even with great care, the tool heads are consumable. The cheaper F1080 head on the base G1 will likely need replacing every 6 to 12 months, while the tougher industrial i32 on the G1X should get you about 2 years of production if you stay on top of your maintenance. No matter which configuration you choose, the machine includes 2 distinct work surfaces: a large standard flatbed measuring 420 by 330 by 130 millimeters, and a mini flatbed optimized for smaller items at 130 by 330 by 150 millimeters. As for pricing, the base G1 is launching at $16.99. The G1X sits at $29.99, and if you want to go full 3D, that package is $32.99. So what's the final verdict? At around $3,000 for the G1X, this is obviously not an impulse buy for the casual weekend hobbyist. But if you run a small business, design tabletop gaming minis, or make artsy stuff, the ability to jump from flat 2D prints to full-color textured 3D objects on a single desktop machine is absolutely wild. I'll put links to the Heygears early bird launch down in the description below, and if you want to check out the bundles or lock in that discount with a $50 deposit. Let me know in the comments what you would want to print first if you had a full-color 3D printer in your workshop. Huge thanks to Heygears for letting me beta test this unit, and thanks to you guys for watching. Maybe I'll catch you at Open Sauce.